The old tractor had been dead for 3 weeks. Darius Volkov did not mind. He had fixed harder things in harder places with less. He sat in the dirt beside it in the gray, early light of Ashfeld's morning, both arms buried past the elbow in its engine block, and he worked. Not fast, not slow, just steady, the way he did everything now. His granddaughter, Mila, sat on the fence rail behind him eating a piece of bread. She was 6 years old and had decided that watching him work was the best thing to do before school. He did not argue with her. He liked the company. "Dedushka," she said, "is it broken forever?" "Nothing is broken forever," he said. "Papa says it is." "Your papa said the same thing about the water pump last spring." She thought about that. "You fixed the water pump." "Yes." She went back to her bread. He went back to the engine. Ashefeld was not a famous world. It was not on any map that mattered to anyone important. It sat at the edge of charted space, far from the shipping lanes, far from politics, far from everything Darius had spent 30 years trying to get away from. The colony was small, maybe 400 people, farmers mostly, a few traders, a doctor, a teacher, people who wanted quiet lives and had traveled a long way to find them. Darius had traveled the longest. He had come here 8 years ago with nothing but a bag and a bad knee and his daughter Nadia's address written on a piece of paper. She had not been surprised to see him. She had opened the door, looked at him for a long moment and said, "I made soup, come in." That was Nadia. She did not waste words on things that did not need words. He lived in the small house at the back of her farm. He fixed things. He helped with the harvest. He watched Mila and her younger brother Pav grow up in clean air under an open sky. He slept without dreaming, which was the greatest gift he had ever received. He was almost happy. He had decided that was enough. The engine turned over on the 4th try. Mila cheered from the fence rail. Darius wiped his hands on a cloth and looked up at the sky the way he always did, out of old habit, checking. Clear, pale. 2 small moons still faint above the western hills. He did not see the ships until they were already low. There were 3 of them, dark shapes dropping through cloud cover fast and silent, then the sound catching up, a deep pressure in the chest more than a noise. Darius was on his feet before he understood why. His body remembered things his mind had tried to forget. "Mila," his voice was quiet. "Go inside, go to your mother, do not stop, do not look back." She saw his face and she ran. The ships were Drathon. He knew the silhouette. Long and angular, like something designed by something that had never learned to think of space as anything but a weapon. They dropped low over the colony and the searchlights came on, sweeping white across the fields and houses. Then the first shots came down, not aimed at anything specific, just down into buildings, into the road, into the grain stores. A message. "We are here. You are nothing." Darius moved toward Nadia's house. He passed 2 Drathon soldiers in the lane. They were big, scaled, moving fast in black armor. He did not have a weapon. He had the wrench still in his hand from the tractor. The first soldier turned and did not finish the motion. The second one was faster. Darius took a hit to the ribs that felt like fire and kept moving. Nadia's house was on fire. He went in anyway. He found her in the back room near the children's beds. She had been trying to get to Pav. She had almost made it. Darius knelt beside her and pressed his hand to her face and said her name once, quietly, and then he said nothing else because there was nothing else to say. Pav was not in his bed. Mila was not in the house. Outside he could hear children crying. Not just crying, being moved, being organized. The Drathon were collecting them, lining them up, pushing them toward the transport ramps. He went back out. He fought through the lane and into the square and he counted what he saw. 11 children from the colony, and among them 3 small alien children, Orvani, silver-furred, huge frightened eyes, who had been living with a trader family on the colony's north edge. All of them being herded up the ramp of the nearest transport. He saw Mila. He saw Pav. He ran. A soldier hit him with something that discharged into his spine and he went down hard in the dirt. He tried to get up. He could not. He watched the ramp close. He watched the transport lift. He watched it rise until it was gone. Then everything was quiet except the fires. He lay in the dirt of the square for a long time. When he could move again, he moved slowly, pushing himself up by inches. The colony around him was broken and still. He walked to what had been Nadia's house. In the ash near the doorstep he found her locket, small, silver, the one their mother had given her. He picked it up and held it in his palm. He stood there. He did not cry. He did not shout. He did not make any sound at all. He simply stood in the ash and the smoke with the locket in his hand, and he became very still. Anyone who had ever worked with Darius Volkov would have recognized that stillness. They would have taken a step back. They would have looked for cover. The stillness meant he had already decided. He closed his fingers around the locket and he walked. The Ketavar border station smelled like burned oil and bad decisions. It had been built into the shell of an old asteroid hauler that had died in orbit 40 years ago. Over time, people had bolted things onto it, docking rings, storage pods, a fuel depot that caught fire twice and kept operating anyway. Nobody owned it officially. Nobody needed to. Places like Ketavar existed because the galaxy needed somewhere for business that did not have a name yet. Darius arrived on a cargo runner he had boarded at the Ashefeld emergency relay post, the only thing still transmitting after the raid. He had traded 3 hours of engine work for the ride. The pilot, a four-armed Brellian who communicated mostly in hand gestures, had not asked why a scarred human with no luggage needed to reach the border so fast. That was good. Darius was not in a talking mood. He had been to Ketavar once before, years ago. The layout had changed. The smell had not. He moved through the crowded main walkway with his hands in his pockets and his eyes moving without his head turning. It was an old habit. In crowds, the thing that gives you away is not where you look. It is where you don't look. Darius looked at everything without appearing to. He found what he was looking for in the lower market level, a narrow shop that sold navigation charts and pretended that was all it sold. The sign above the door was in 4 languages. One of them was wrong on purpose. Darius pushed the door open. Broker Hess was behind the counter, sorting data chips into a wooden box. He was a Velhari, pale blue skin, wide flat nose, eyes that were slightly too large for his face in a way that made him look permanently surprised. He was not surprised now. He was the opposite of surprised. He looked at Darius the way a man looks at something he hoped he would never have to see again. "You were done," Hess said. "I was," Darius said. "You told me. 8 years ago you told me. You said, Hess, this is finished, I am done, I am going to go grow things." "I grew things. And now." Darius put both hands flat on the counter. He did not lean. He just stood there, and the distance between a retired farmer and whatever Hess was looking at right now collapsed in about half a second. "Drathon raid," Darius said. "Colony on the Ashefeld mark. They took children, human and Orvani both. I need to know where." Hess was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down on his stool slowly, as if his legs had decided independently. "The Drathon do not file manifests for that kind of cargo," Hess said. "You know that. They don't file them publicly. They still file them. You have access to things that are not public. That is why I am here and not somewhere else." Hess rubbed the side of his face. His rings clicked together. He wore 5 of them, all on the same hand, all different materials. Darius had always found that interesting. A man who wore his wealth on one hand was a man who needed to count it quickly. "This will cost something significant," Hess said. "Yes. Something I have actually wanted for a long time." "Tell me what." Hess looked at him carefully. "The Murin cache, you know the one." Darius said nothing for 3 seconds. The Murin cache was a weapons and equipment store he had buried on a dead moon in the Parex system 11 years ago. It was worth more than this station. He had kept it as a final option for a situation that never came. Now the situation was here, and it turned out the cash was what it cost. "After I have the children," Darius said. "I give you coordinates after. And I trust you because I have never given you a reason not to." Hess pulled out a small data reader and spent 4 minutes on it without saying anything. Then he turned it around and slid it across the counter. Veldrun Station, deep inside Drathon-controlled space. A processing facility, that was what the Drathon called it, a place where people became inventory. Darius looked at the coordinates. He read everything on the screen carefully. Veldrun was large, heavily defended, and sitting inside 3 layers of Empire patrol routes. Getting there without a Drathon registry signature was close to impossible. Getting in was a different problem entirely. "I need a ship," Darius said. "I have a ship. A small one, nothing that registers as a threat profile. I have a Pelsi courier, 6 years old, dented, slow. The transponder reads as a medical supply run. Nobody stops medical supply runs near the border because the Drathon tax everything that stops." "That will work." "It will not work," Hess said flatly. "Veldrun is a military installation. You are one person. You are not young. With respect, Darius." "I do not need it to be easy," Darius said. "I need it to be possible." Hess looked at him for a long time. Then he looked away and began writing down a docking bay number on a small piece of card. "There is a weapons kit in the ship's maintenance hatch," he said quietly. "I kept it there from the last time I needed it. I did not take it out. Take what you need." Darius picked up the card. "The cache coordinates," Hess said, "when this is over." "When this is over," Darius agreed. He was in the ship within the hour. As the docking clamps released, Hess stood at the bay window and watched the small battered courier slide out into open space. Beside him, his assistant, a young Telari with green eyes and no experience of anything yet, watched it go. "Who is he?" the assistant asked. Hess was quiet for a moment. "The Drathon raided a farming colony," he said. "They destroyed the farms. They took the children. They killed the farmer's daughter." He paused. "What they do not understand is what kind of farmer." The courier disappeared into the dark. Hess turned away from the window. He felt, for reasons he could not entirely explain, that he would be hearing about this again very soon. Veldrun did not look like a prison from the outside. That was the point. It was built to look like an industrial transfer hub, wide docking arms, freight containers stacked in neat rows, a standard navigational beacon that broadcast the usual clearance codes. To a passing ship, it was just another way station inside Drathon space. Busy, ordinary, not worth a second look. Darius looked at it for a long time on the approach scanner. He counted the patrol routes. He counted the docking traffic. He watched 2 Drathon military transports arrive and unload, and he watched what came off of them, and his jaw tightened once and then was still. He used the medical supply transponder to dock at the outer ring, Bay 31, which the manifest listed as a pharmaceutical delivery. A Drathon customs officer in light armor came on board, scanned the crates Hess had loaded as cover, and did not look at Darius with any real interest. Darius was dressed like a courier, plain uniform, tablet in hand, looking tired. He had found over 30 years that tired was the best thing to look. People ignored tired. People did not inspect tired. The officer stamped the manifest and left. Darius waited 40 minutes, then he moved. He had spent the 3-day transit studying everything Hess's data had on Veldrun's layout. It was not complete. Black site facilities never had complete public records, but the maintenance infrastructure was standard Drathon military construction, which he had worked inside before under circumstances he did not like to think about. The maintenance tunnels ran parallel to the main corridors. They connected every section. They were not monitored because the Drathon believed no one would use them. The tunnels were small, dark, and full of pipe joints that left marks on shoulders and knees. Darius spent 40 minutes in those tunnels and came out in the inner ring. The inner ring was where they kept the recent arrivals. He could hear it before he saw it, a low, constant sound that was not quite crying and not quite silence, something in between. The cell block was lit in red, the way Drathon facilities always lit spaces they did not want to be comfortable. The doors were heavy, the locks were keyed to Drathon palm prints, and there were two guards at the end of the corridor who were talking to each other and not watching the way they were supposed to. Darius did not rush. He worked the first cell lock with a bypass tool from Hess's kit, a flat piece of equipment smaller than his palm that read and replicated the lock's frequency. It took 90 seconds per door. He had done this before in conditions that were considerably worse. The cell was empty, so was the second. The third held a Drathon juvenile that was clearly not from the colony and was not his business right now. He closed that door gently. The fourth cell stopped him. She was curled in the far corner with her knees to her chest and her 4 amber eyes wide open, watching the door. She was small, smaller than Mila, smaller than most children he had seen, covered in silver-gray fur matted with grime and something that might have been dried blood on one ear. Her clothes were gray prisoner issue, 2 sizes too large. She had not made a sound when the door opened. She was the kind of frightened that had gone past the point of making sounds. Darius crouched down in the doorway. He did not step inside. He did not reach toward her. He simply got down to her level and stayed there. He reached slowly into his inside pocket and took out the ration bar he had kept from the ship's supply. Plain, dense, the kind of thing that tasted like nothing but kept you alive. He held it out toward her across the floor and said nothing. She stared at it, she stared at him. He waited. After a long moment she moved, not fast, testing each movement as if the floor might disappear. She came close enough to take the bar from his hand and then pulled back to the wall. She ate it in 3 bites. "My name is Darius," he said quietly. "I am here for the children from the Ashefeld colony. Can you tell me where they are?" Her eyes moved. Something shifted in them, not quite trust, but the thing just before trust. She was Orvani. The Orvani communicated partly through a subsonic hum that humans could not hear, which meant that alien children sometimes had trouble understanding that human language required waiting for the other person to finish. But she had clearly been around the colony children long enough to understand how humans talked, because she answered in accented but clear words. "Deeper block," she said, "past the blue door. They are marked for export tomorrow." Tomorrow, that moved things. "What is your name?" he asked. She looked at him for a moment as if the question itself was strange, as if she had not expected anyone to ask. "Sierra," she said. "Sierra, can you walk?" She stood up slowly, but she stood. That told him enough. They moved together through the cell block. Darius cleared the 2 guards at the end of the corridor without waking the rest of the block, fast, quiet, non-lethal. He left them zip-tied to a pipe with their comms pulled. The blue door was past the guard post, sealed with a secondary lock. The bypass tool took 2 minutes this time. The lock was newer. On the other side, he found 11 children. They were in a large holding pen, 6 human, 3 Orvani, 2 others he could not immediately identify, all small, all frightened, all watching the door when it opened. He scanned faces. Mila was there. Pav was there. He felt something move through his chest and then compress itself back into stillness because there was no time for it yet. Mila saw him. Her face did something complicated. "Didushka," she whispered. "Quiet," he said softly. "Stay together, we walk. No running until I say." Sierra moved to the smallest child without being told, a little human boy who was shaking, and took his hand. The boy stopped shaking. Darius noticed that. He filed it away. He led them toward the maintenance tunnels. The alarm went off 40 seconds later, not because of anything he had done. A different section of the facility, a different guard doing a check. Wrong timing. It happened. Darius shifted the plan without stopping his feet. "Now," he said, "we run." Running with 11 children through a military installation is not a clean thing. It is loud, it is slow. It is the opposite of every extraction Darius had ever been trained to run. Children do not move in formation. They breathe too hard. The smallest ones have shorter legs. One of the Orvani children made a sound that Darius could not hear, but which clearly caused the other Orvani children physical distress, because 2 of them stumbled at the same time, and he had to catch one without dropping his weapon. He adapted. That was all there was to do. He kept them moving through the service corridor that ran along the inner ring's north wall. Red alarm light was strobing through every grill and vent. He could hear boots on the main corridor floor, heavy, fast, multiple. They had not found the service route yet. That gave him maybe 3 minutes. Sierra was doing something he had not expected. She was managing the back of the group, without being asked, without being told. She moved between the slower children, touching their shoulders, making a low sound that Darius could not hear but that clearly helped, because the 2 Orvani children steadied when she passed close to them. The smaller human children were watching her instead of the walls, which meant they were not looking at the alarms, which meant they were less afraid. She was 6 or 7 years old, and she was running field support like she had done it before. He did not have time to think about that. He filed it. The maintenance junction at the northeast corner split 3 ways. Darius went right, toward the outer ring, toward Bay 31, toward the ship. He moved to the front of the group and held his hand up at every corner, checking before he waved them through. They were learning his signals. After the 3rd corner, he did not have to explain them anymore. The children watched his hand. They were smart. He had not doubted that, but it was still something to see. The junction to the outer ring required crossing 40 meters of open floor, a loading space between the inner and outer sections, high-ceilinged, currently empty, but with sight lines from 3 different elevated positions. Darius stopped the group at the door and looked. The elevated positions were unmanned. The floor was clear. The cameras were on a standard sweep cycle. He had clocked them on the way in. 12 seconds between sweeps on the east-facing units. Enough. "When I move, you all move," he said quietly. "Fast, no stopping. Bay 31 is marked on the wall in yellow. You go through the door and you keep going until you reach the ship. The door of the ship is open. You go inside and you stay down." Mila looked at him. "What about you?" "I am behind you," he said. She nodded. She took Pav's hand. Sierra was already at the front of the group, waiting. Darius moved on the sweep gap and they came after him like water, fast and quiet and all at once. The floor was smooth and loud under running feet, but the alarm was already covering the sound. They made the far door in 9 seconds. He held it open and counted them through. 11 children. Sierra last, looking back at him once. He followed. Bay 31 was 30 meters down the outer ring corridor. He could see the ship's tail through the bay window. He could also see Lieutenant Garo. Garo was young, maybe 25 in human years, though Drathon aged differently. He was standing in the corridor with his sidearm drawn, facing them. His scales were a lighter green than most Drathon soldiers. His armor was standard, but his rank insignia was low. He had clearly come around the corner and found the exact situation he had not been expecting to find, which was a scarred human with 11 children behind him moving toward an unauthorized ship. They looked at each other. Darius did not raise his weapon first. He stopped. He kept his hand loose at his side and he looked at the young soldier and he said, quietly and clearly, "You have a choice right now. Walk away." Garo's grip on his sidearm was not steady. Darius noticed that. A steady grip meant training taking over. An unsteady grip meant the person was still thinking. Thinking was good. Thinking meant there was still a conversation happening inside him. Behind Darius, the children were silent, even the smallest one. Sierra had done something, some sound below hearing, and they had all gone still. Garo looked at the children. He looked at Darius. He looked at the children again. His sidearm went down, not holstered, just down, pointed at the floor. Darius was already moving. He did not thank Garo. There was no time, and it would have been the wrong thing anyway. He moved the children into the bay, up the ramp, inside. He got the ship's door closed and the ramp up in under 40 seconds. He pulled Mila away from the door by the shoulder, not rough but firm, moved Pav into a seat restraint, got the two smallest children buckled by another older child who clearly knew how restraints worked. Sierra had already found a grip handle on the wall and wrapped both small hands around it. He went forward and launched the ship. The docking clamp release was supposed to require authorization. Darius had spent 30 minutes on the approach route working out how to bypass it. He did it in 11 seconds under pressure, which was slower than he wanted but faster than the clamp lock could engage a second time. The courier came out of Bay 31 fast and wrong, not the standard slow exit, just straight out into open space, thrusters up immediately. 2 station defense guns tracked them. One fired. The shot went wide left. The second did not fire. He did not know why the second did not fire. He did not have time to find out. He pushed the ship into the debris field at the system's edge and went dark. No transponder, no running lights, just drifting metal and the sound of 11 children breathing. Back on Veldrun, Lieutenant Garo filed his incident report. In the section marked Subject Description, he wrote, Adult human male unknown. In the section marked Action Taken, he wrote, Lost visual contact during alarm response. He submitted the report and sat for a while at his station, not moving, thinking about the look on those children's faces. He thought about it for a long time. On the bridge of his command ship, Admiral Voris read the initial incident summary and felt something he had not felt in several years. He read it twice. Then he called for his intelligence officer and said 4 words. Find me this human. The debris field was called the Paro Scatter on navigational charts, which was a name given by someone who had never been inside it. From inside, it was not a scatter. It was a cathedral, pieces of 3 dead ships, 2 destroyed asteroids, and 40 years of accumulated collision debris formed walls and ceilings and corridors of tumbling metal. Nothing inside it moved in a straight line. Everything reflected everything else. Sensors bounced. Signals split. It was the worst place in the system for a pursuit fleet to operate and the best place for one damaged courier to disappear. Darius had clocked it on the approach 3 days ago and decided, if it went wrong, this was where he would go. It had gone wrong. Here they were. He cut the main engine and let the ship drift on the field's own currents, making small adjustments with the maneuvering thrusters only when necessary. Outside the viewport, torn hull plating the size of a building turned silently in the dark. The children watched it through the side port with wide eyes. Pav pressed his forehead to the glass. One of the Orvani children made a long, quiet sound, and the 2 beside her answered back in kind. It was clearly not distress, more like wonder. Darius did not know enough about Orvani to know what they were saying. He thought it was probably the same thing Pav was thinking. That space was very large and very strange, and they were very small inside it. The pursuit fleet arrived at the field's edge 7 minutes after the courier went dark. Darius watched them on passive scan, 4 ships, military configuration, sweeping in from the station side. They held at the boundary. Fleet vessels did not go into debris fields if they could help it. The sensor return inside was chaos. They would be trying to untangle it, looking for a power signature, a transponder ghost, anything. He gave them nothing. In the cargo space behind the cockpit, the children had settled into something resembling calm. Not peace. They were not there yet, and some of them might not be there for a long time. But the immediate terror had eased. The human children had organized themselves without being asked, the older ones sitting with the younger ones, sharing the water packs from the ship's emergency supply. The Orvani children had grouped near the hull wall, which was apparently warmer than the floor. Sierra sat slightly apart from both groups, which meant she was between them. Darius noticed from the cockpit that both groups of children kept checking where Sierra was, the human children and the Orvani children both, as if she were the reference point. He found that interesting. She was not the oldest. She was not the biggest. She just had a way of being present that made other people feel the space around her was safer than the space without her. After the first hour, she came forward and sat in the co-pilot seat. She did not say anything for a while. She watched the debris turn outside the viewport. Then she said, "Why did you come for us? You did not know us." Darius was quiet for a moment. He thought about the honest answer. He had come because of Mila and Pav. That was the start of it. But the Orvani children, Sierra, that was something that had become its own reason somewhere in the tunnels of Veldrun. "Because someone should," he said. Sierra considered this. She appeared to be turning the words over the way she might turn a stone, checking the weight of it, checking what was underneath. "On my world," she said slowly, "there is a saying, a person who helps a stranger owns nothing but gains everything." She paused. "I did not understand it before." Darius said nothing. He checked the passive scan. The fleet was still at the boundary, still sweeping. He made a small thruster correction to keep them deeper in the field. "Your daughter," Sierra said quietly. It was not a question. He looked at her. She was looking at the viewport, not at him. The amber eyes were large in the dim cockpit light. "Yes," he said. She did not say anything else about it. She did not offer comfort in the human way, no words about being sorry, no reaching for his hand. She simply stayed in the seat beside him, which he understood after a moment was her version of the same thing. The fleet gave up the active sweep after 2 more hours. Darius tracked them withdrawing on passive scan, pulling back toward Veldrun. They would regroup. They would file reports. The reports would go to Admiral Vorus, who would by now have received his intelligence briefing. Darius had no illusions about that timeline. Vorus would be looking for him, and Vorus had more ships and more reach than a single dented courier. He needed to move. He needed to move in a direction they would not expect. He pulled up the navigation chart and studied it. The diplomatic relay station at Harren Point was 14 hours out human diplomatic presence, technically neutral space, outside Drathon enforcement jurisdiction. He could hand the children off there. That was the right move for the children. Then he looked at the other set of coordinates, the ones he had not entered into the nav system yet. The Drathon command ship Vorus ran from, it had been listed in the Veldrun station logs he had pulled during the infiltration. Standard fleet positioning, updated every 6 hours. Vorus moved it regularly, but the pattern was readable. The right move for the children was Harren Point. Then there was the other thing. He sat with that for a while. From the back he heard Mila's voice. She was telling the youngest Orvani child a story about something, her voice low and gentle. He could not make out the words. The Orvani child clearly did not understand them either, but she was listening. Mila had understood, in the way children sometimes understand things faster than adults, that the words were not the point. The voice was the point. He set the course for Harren Point. Then, after the children were off, he would set a different course. He had one more thing to do before this was over. Not for Mila, not for Pav, not even for himself exactly. For Nadia, so that the people who made the decision to raid a quiet farming colony would understand, permanently and on record, what that decision had cost them. He flew toward the relay station and did not say any of this out loud. Sierra in the seat beside him watched the stars and said nothing either. But once, when the debris field gave way to open space and the stars came through clean and bright, she made a very soft sound, something low and harmonic that Darius could barely feel more than hear, and all 3 Orvani children in the back answered it. A call and a response. He did not know what it meant. He thought it might mean, "We are still here." Harren Point was a small station but a clean one. the human diplomatic officer on duty, a tired woman named Reyes who had been posted here for 2 years and had never handled anything larger than a shipping dispute, came to the docking bay and stood very still when 11 children walked off a battered courier. She looked at Darius. He gave her the short version. Colony raid, Drathon operation. The children needed medical checks and food and someone to contact their surviving families. Reyes did not ask many questions. She was tired, not slow. She got the children moving toward the medical wing in under 4 minutes, which was faster than Darius had expected. Sierra did not move with the other children. She stood at the bottom of the ramp and watched Darius. He had his bag over one shoulder, a bag with a weapons kit and not much else. He had checked the Drathon fleet positioning twice on the way here. Vorus's command ship was 11 hours out, moving toward the border at standard patrol speed. Predictable. Darius had planned for predictable. "You are going back," Sierra said. It was not a question. She had been watching him for 14 hours and had learned to read his movements the way you learn to read weather, not from what was happening now, but from the small things that came before. "Yes," he said. She looked at him for a long time. Her ears moved slightly in a way he had no context for. Then she said, very carefully, as if translating from something else, "Come back." He did not make her a promise he might not keep. He did not say it will be fine or I will be safe. He looked at her and nodded once. She accepted that the way she accepted most things completely, without argument. He walked back up the ramp. The command ship Vorus ran was called the Drathvel, a heavy cruiser, 200 crew, not designed to be boarded by one person. Nothing was designed to be boarded by one person. That was generally considered to make the enterprise impossible rather than merely difficult. Darius had spent 30 years forming a specialized opinion on that difference. He came at it from the maintenance approach. Military ships had umbilical docking systems for resupply that ran on automated protocols between jumps. He matched the courier's signature to a supply registry he had pulled from the Veldrun station logs, approached on the resupply bearing, and connected to the aft umbilical during the crew rotation window when the bay had the fewest eyes on it. He was inside the Drathvel in 17 minutes. What came next was not a battle. Darius moved through a ship of 200 trained soldiers and had 3 brief contacts total, a corridor guard redirected by a pulled alarm, an officer who opened the wrong door and found nothing, one engineer who simply did not turn around in time. He had spent 30 years learning how people move, where they watch, where they do not watch. A threat from where no one is watching is not a threat. It is a ghost. He reached the command deck in 41 minutes. Vorus was alone in his personal operations room. He reviewed reports alone before bringing his officers in, a habit listed in the station logs Darius had pulled at Veldrun. He had relied on that. The admiral looked up. He held the composed expression for about 4 seconds. Then he saw Darius's eyes, and the expression changed to something more honest. Darius did not touch him. He sat in the chair across the desk and placed Nadia's locket on the surface between them. He said her name, just her name. He let Vorus look at the locket and understand the geometry of what was happening. He had not come for Vorus dead. Dead admirals became martyrs. Their files got sealed. Their crimes got buried in the reorganization that followed. Darius wanted something that could not be buried. The operation took 22 minutes. It required Vorus's own voice, his own rank authentication codes, and the ship's internal broadcast system which, because Drathon command ships were built for fleet-wide communication, connected automatically to every ship in the patrol group and through the relay to the nearest Empire communication node. When it was done, every ship in the border fleet and every station in relay range had a clear recording of Admiral Vorus explaining in specific detail who ordered the Ashefeld colony raid, why, what resources had been targeted, and what instructions had gone to the soldiers on the ground. His voice, his codes, his words. The recording also named 6 other colony raids over the past 4 years. Darius had found those in the Vel-Drun logs and added them to the file. He left Vorus alive, sitting behind his desk with his rank insignia on the table in front of him and the broadcast log running on his screen. The Admiral said nothing as Darius walked out. There was nothing left to say that had not already gone wide across the relay. The courier was still at the umbilical. He disconnected and moved. Behind him, the Drathvel was chaos, officers flooding the command deck, communications going frantic, someone trying to pull the broadcast back from the relay node, like trying to unring a bell. He docked at Harren Point 2 hours later. Reyes met him at the bay. "We have been getting signals from 6 different directions," she said. "What did you do?" "Finish something," he said. He walked toward the medical wing. Sierra was not in the medical wing. He found her in the docking bay corridor, sitting on the floor outside the sealed bay door with her knees pulled up and 4 amber eyes on the door. When it opened and he walked through, she stood. She did not run, she was too composed for that, or too tired, or both. She walked to him and stood beside him, and he put his hand on the top of her head, light and brief, the way he had done with Mila when she was small. "I told you," she said quietly. "What?" "I did not say anything," she said. "I thought it." He understood. He had thought things too. They walked back toward the others. On a screen mounted to the corridor wall, a news broadcast ran, alien text scrolling fast, images of the Drathon border fleet, a word repeating in multiple languages. He did not need to read all of it. He could read enough. The word was Baba Yaga. Not a name anymore. A warning. Moving through relay stations and news feeds and quiet conversations on 100 ships and stations where people who had lived under the Drathon Empire were beginning, slowly, carefully, to lift their heads. Darius did not watch the broadcast. He walked with Sierra toward the sound of children's voices and did not look back. He was done with the past. The rest was up to the galaxy.